welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. I'm your host, Nick Leach, and I am excited to have you back. Again, the Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every month, I'm going to be inviting one member of the Cinema Club to be my co-host for the week, who will choose the movie of the month and join me on the podcast to talk about that movie. The Cinema Club is back, and we're so excited to be doing, as a special welcome back, to be going through the series on Disney Plus, Obi-Wan Kenobi. We are covering in this episodes 3 and 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And as usual, before we get into the episode, we just want to give a huge spoiler warning and be completely clear that we will be getting into the episode and be talking about what happens in these episodes. So if you haven't gone and watched Obi-Wan Kenobi yet, or don't want to be spoiled, stop now before we get into it.
It's been 10 years.
The fight is done. We lost.
Leave us alone, Ben.
When the time comes, he must be trained.
Like you trained his father.
It's my responsibility.
Obi-Wan, I've loved you always.
There's a thing that swallows you. It holds you together when it's tearing you apart. It's terrifying.
The key to hunting Jedi.
They're coming.
Is patience.
Jedi are cowards. They failed you. There is no point in protecting them. Where is Obi-Wan?
The Jedi are all but extinct.
The Jedi code is like an itch. He cannot help it.
Stay hidden.
Or we will not survive.
You still want Kenobi. He's gone. Where is he?
I want every bounty hunter to squeeze him.
You can't escape here, Obi-Wan!
And this week we have a returning person from our last episode. It is Chris Amick. So welcome again, Chris, back to the episode.
Thank you so much. Very excited to jump back into Star Wars this morning with you guys and our audience. Yeah, let's just jump into it. I'm excited, man.
And our special guest, Justin, unfortunately wasn't able to be on this episode. So we have another special guest. It is Richard Lionel Fontanes Jr. So welcome to the episode, man. It's good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for the full named introduction. Trying to get that off the ground, So anywhere we can put that in, I appreciate that. Glad to be here. Excited to be talking about the show.
Okay, so Rich, since you're kind of new to the podcast, let us know kind of what brought you to Star Wars, what you loved about Star Wars. Did you grow up with Star Wars? Kind of what is your background? What brings you to Obi-Wan as a series that you're really interested in?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Just thinking about just my history with Star Wars. I remember watching marathons on TV, like TNT or something like that when I was a kid. And this was like the 90s. So I like to think that I'm kind of like, it's like it was after the original trilogy, before the prequels. We didn't know the prequels were coming. So I just loved it, man. And I was like young to the point where I believed, you know what I mean? They were in space. So I wondered, how are they filming this in space, as a kid? And when I watch it now, especially the original trilogies, I just am reminded of that like sense of wonder that, we all had at one time. And just, just those thoughts I had when I watched it, like how'd they get this big Jabba the Hutt guy? You know what I mean? Like not realizing there was makeup and special effects and stuff like that. I wasn't privy to that. I'm like 5 years old. I always loved it. I remember when the prequels came out, it was a really exciting time. It is funny because it seems like the prequels have grown in stature, maybe the way people remember it from how we felt at the time. I remember the lead up to Phantom Menace. I remember that they even had a music video on like MTV that was like Duel of Fates with like scenes from the movie before the movie came out. So I remember just like literally just watching MTV waiting for that video to come on. And I'm probably showing my age a little bit, but it was just like an exciting time. And I was probably middle school at the time, so still young enough where I didn't really have too many issues with it. I think by the time the second movie came out, episode 2, it was like, that was, you start to maybe pick up on some flaws. I did like episode 3. I saw that movie 5 times within the first week it was in theaters. So, I enjoyed that. And I do enjoy the way Star Wars has grown into, like, especially the prequel trilogies, is now the fun is like the memes, and some of the things that were unintentionally, but like have become good unintentionally, so I've just kind of enjoyed that. And so, I was excited to watch the show, kind of excited to see what they did. What does it look like for Obi-Wan to be living in between episode 3 and episode 4? So just the history with Star Wars, and kind of cool, excited to see a new story being told.
Absolutely. And the thing that I love most about where we currently are in the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars history is that these shows, especially the Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and also too, even the Deborah Chow stuff, what she's doing here with Obi-Wan Kenobi, is doing a lot to fill in kind of some of those plot holes, and also even a lot of those like you were saying, things that they were making fun, that people have been making fun of, and some of those kind of more lame stuff, like especially Hayden Christensen's portrayal of Anakin. They're actually really using that and like fixing a lot of those problems through these shows. And so that's one thing, especially as we have gotten into episode 3 and 4 here in Obi-Wan, I've been seeing them do a lot more of, and something I've really been appreciating. So with that, let's get right into it. So we're going to start with episode 3, and we open with Obi-Wan on an unmanned transport ship that he and Leia have hitched on Dayu. He's on his knees praying, for lack of a better word. He's trying to attempt to contact Qui-Gon Jinn, but he's not able to. Qui-Gon is not answering him. And as we're hearing him and seeing him do this, we also see kind of flashbacks with the sound of Reva's voice telling him that Anakin is alive. Also the scene with Anakin from the prequels that show him being burned alive and everything. But as we're doing this, we're also seeing an intercut of Darth Vader literally being, quote, quote, built. His mechanical arms and legs are being fitted to his body. His mask is being placed on his head. And all of this is happening on Mustafar, the lava planet where Darth Vader has his castle. And I just wanted to start off by saying, we saw Darth Vader, I should say, being built in episode 3. And the thing that was so crazy about starting episode 3 with the end with this building of Darth Vader is that we finally see how painful this process is for Anakin. I mean, we see first his breathing tubes being taken off of his back, and he has to wait. He has to hold his breath every single day until everything is put on him, and finally his breathing mask is put on him. That's a long time that he has to hold his breath every single morning that this thing is put on. And so we see just the pain that Anakin has to go through literally every single day, let alone the mental anguish that he's going through being on the planet, literally, that the love of his life was killed, that he killed. And so it's such a powerful scene that we start this scene with, and we see the inner turmoil not only that Anakin is facing, but also how it really relates and connects to Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and I kind of liked that it kind of this episode started out that way, because episode 2 ended with that quick scene of Vader in the bath tank, I believe. So it was really cool, like you said, Nick, just seeing his morning routine, so to speak, as he was getting ready. And then, kind of touching on Obi-Wan, I thought for sure he would have made contact with Qui-Gon by now. So that was interesting that we're still, this is episode 3 now, and he's still trying to make contact with Qui-Gon as he has, we're assuming for years now. But I'm looking forward to when that's actually, hopefully going to pan out here in the next few episodes for us.
For sure. And also, too, what's so interesting is that being on episode 3, we still have yet to see Obi-Wan's powers actually coming back. And that's really what happens here in episode 3 and 4 is we finally see Obi-Wan coming to terms with the loss of his powers and him embracing that back into his life, because he literally has to. He's been putting this thing off for years. He's buried it way deep inside of himself. He's gotten really rusty, and we see just how rusty he is at the end of this episode. And then we go into episode 4 where finally he's started to, it's all coming back to him, not because he wants it to, but because he has to. So as we're on Mustafar, Vader sits on his throne. Reva, the third sister, appears in a hologram form. He says he doesn't really care that the Grand Inquisitor is dead, and she says that if she completes her mission, that he'll make her Grand Inquisitor.
The moment where we kind of see Vader in his elements, he's on Mustafar, as you kind of mentioned earlier, in his castle type thing. I just really was like, hell yeah, Vader is back, because we got the little hints prior, right? So I just was I was in that element. I was very excited about that. Also wanted to mention, James Earl Jones coming back to voice Darth Vader. I mean, that made it for me. I was like, it was like peak Vader, I guess, even though it was maybe a 2-minute thing. It was just really cool to see Vader, being Vader in that element, talking to Reva like that. It's like, I don't give a shit about the Inquisitor. Go finish the mission. Go get Obi-Wan.
So the one thing I did want to say about this is that's really interesting about what you say about James Earl Jones being back. So
yeah,
one thing I did actually notice in the end credits is that though he's credited, if you go down even farther, it actually credits his voice as being done through a website called Respeecher.
Okay. Interesting.
And Respeecher is a really interesting website. I've actually seen it done on one of my favorite YouTube channels called Corridor Digital. Is what Respeecher is that it's actually an AI software very similar to deepfake technology. Basically what it is it's a deepfake for voices. And so they actually used Respeecher to basically be a deepfake voice for James Earl Jones so that it would sound like a younger James Earl Jones, because it would sound very different now, whereas this James Earl Jones in Darth Vader voice in episode 3 is very reminiscent of the James Earl Jones voice back in the
originals. Yeah. Crazy.
So it's so interesting to see how Star Wars is using all these different brand new technologies, being at the forefront of these different technologies, using things like deep fakes for Leia, for Luke in The Mandalorian, as well as using Respeecher for James Earl Jones' voice.
Yeah, it's great. It's cool that he can still be a part of it, even obviously people's voices change, but the technology's there for it. What I really love, and you kind of hit on it as far as this episode or maybe this series, is they really do highlight how painful it must be to be Vader, which I feel almost embarrassed. It was this episode where I realized there's a scene later, I can bring it up later, but I never thought about it. Clearly the guy's been cut up and he's, been put back together and all these kind of technologies that are keeping him alive. But not just we know he has the emotional pain, right? We know that Padme dying was a big deal for him, as it would be for anyone, but just the physical pain. And I like that they're highlighting that, so that's cool. And then I just want to say Mustafar, a genius name for a planet. It's not kind of close. It's not even a little far. It's just Mustafar, but it's still that's silly, but it still actually sounds like an evil name for a planet, just the way they say it. So it's just kind of, it's genius.
Absolutely. So Obi-Wan and Leia's cargo ship lands on a mining planet, a new planet that we haven't seen so far. It's a lush and beautiful place that was until the Empire ravished it all for its elements. And so out in the middle of a plain, he thinks that he sees Anakin, but it's just a ghostly white face. He's imagining it. Anakin's got into his brain. Elsewhere, we also see that Riva has landed on a really watery planet and travels down to a cylindrical building. It's the Inquisitor's HQ, and it's a basically an iceberg of a building because it goes underwater. It gets bigger as it goes down, and it's basically just the layer of the Inquisitors. Riva tells the fifth brother that she's spoken to Vader, and there's a real power exchange, power dynamic, trying to figure out who is going to be the new Grand Inquisitor here. After slightly more discussion, she orders the probe droids to be unleashed. These are the same probe droids that we saw on the planet Hoth, searching for Luke in The Empire Strikes Back. Back on the dusty mining planet, Obi-Wan and Leia start to get their stories straight. He tells her that she's going to be his daughter and that she shouldn't do any talking. They flag down a truck that is being driven by a mole man called Freck, who was played by Zach Braff. It was amazing to see this cameo. I love this character. It was awesome. Who offers them a ride to a spaceport, but as they're climbing in the back, they notice that he has a hand-painted Imperial flag. When they get seated, they realize just how into the Empire he is. He's very into the Empire.
Yeah, Zach Braff as the voice of Freck. That was great. I was like, I know that voice, and it wasn't until the credits when I realized who it was. Perfect, because you knew he sounded so nice. Like he sounded like, it almost looked like a kid's cartoon, kind of like or maybe like a Barney type character. You know what I mean? Like he was just this kind of kid friendly person. But you knew by his voice and his demeanor, someone sounding that nice is probably going to have a dark side, right? And not like he had a dark side, but that revelation that he was Imperial and he was all in on the Empire.
And not just Imperial, but this is a planet that has been basically colonized by the Empire. It's a place that was taken over. And so in a lot of these places, you'd think there'd be a rebellion, that people wouldn't like it, that they'd feel really just imperialized and colonized and all this kind of bad stuff. But this guy is super into the Empire, so much so that instead of just carrying a banner that has been given to him because he has to for his job, this is a hand-painted Imperial banner that he has done himself. So this guy clearly is in the pocket of the Empire. He's not a good dude, even though he seems like it. And though he seems like a really nice guy, he would hand them over, as we see how that actually happens, in a heartbeat. So Leia and Obi-Wan are in a real bad situation here.
Yeah, and I was going to kind of mention, I really enjoyed the Freck character, honestly, because I think it was an interesting Star Wars type villain, because it is kind of an accurate reflection, of some people in our world today. He's serving the Empire, they don't care about Freck. Let's be real here. But he's serving the Empire that doesn't care about him just because he believes there must be order. Order must be maintained, even if, that's at the expense of other people's freedoms, lives, what have you. But like you guys were saying, like Freck's character also is showing us that a lot of people view the Empire as a positive thing, which I don't think we've really seen very much of that prior to this, or at least this viewpoint on it. And I don't know his backstory. Maybe, hey, nobody's attacking my truck anymore as I'm driving down the road. But this character is showing us as an audience that the Empire definitely has sympathizers, if not big fans. One other thing I wanted to mention about this little kind of recap section. I know in episodes 1 and 2, I wasn't totally sold on Moses Ingram's Riva character. Honestly, I was like, what's Riva's drive? And I feel like we got to see that a little bit better in episode 3. We understand her drive. We can see that kind of cool rivalry with the third brother that she's having, where they're all kind of competing for Vader's satisfaction. They want to be next in line. You know, they want to work for Vader. And I feel like, especially like in Star Wars, like I like to have fun with the bad guys. You know, I want to have fun watching them and I feel like I was having fun doing that with Reva's character in this episode. Finally, in episode 3.
I think episode 3 and 4 has finally done a really good job with her character, with Reva's character, because it's finally given her a lot more depth and dimension. Whereas before, she was in episode 1 and 2, she was just this person that was just on this mission to get, and there wasn't a lot of understanding and background of why.
Yes.
And so we finally see here that there is a lot more motivation on her part. Not only is it this motivation to get back at Obi-Wan, because again, we're getting a few more hints here and there that Reva may be, and we still haven't gotten a clear answer, but Reva may be one of those Padawans that was in the Jedi Temple during Order 66. But finally here we're also seeing that she has also this other drive to be favorite of Vader's, also to have power, being consumed by power a little bit like Anakin was, and consumed by the dark side, and just trying to be better than the fifth brother, trying to be in charge of everything. And we're finally seeing that she's genuinely, it's more than just being on a revenge mission. She has been more and more consumed by the dark side.
Maybe I might be the only, I don't know if I'm the only one who feels this way, but she kind of is a character you both despise and you're kind of rooting for. She's clearly, she's evil. You know what I mean? Like the thing she does is not good. And we see in this episode later on in the next episode how far she's willing to go, right? But at the same time, she's within the Empire, within the Inquisitors, the level she's at, she's an underdog. And it's hard not to root for someone who has things against them, who's trying to make it, So I found myself in different situations either being like, oh man, she's a good villain and I don't like her, or I kind of want her to, get back at the fifth brother or the other Inquisitors, and get Vader's approval. So I don't know if you guys felt that way at all, but I found myself kind of feeling that way and wondering what's the future for her character. Will she remain a villain? Will she be good?
Absolutely. I totally agree. So as we go on further, they're in Freck truck and they stop to pick up some stormtroopers that need a ride. They tell him they're looking for a Jedi. He says he wouldn't know how to even pick out a Jedi. Obi-Wan accidentally lets slip that Leia's name is Leia. And he does correct himself by saying that she always reminds him of her mother, who he says her name was Leia. And the stormtroopers, as usual, being real dumb, they believe it. So Freck comes to a laser gate. Freck tells the stormtroopers at the gate that they might want to check out his passengers because Freck is smarter than we give him credit for. He's figured these guys out, and they go back and start to search Obi-Wan, and at that point there's a probe droid that shows up and gets a good look at him. It's a probe droid that has his wanted poster, and so it figures him out, and Obi-Wan takes out his blaster, not even taking out his lightsaber here. He takes out his blaster and blasts a probe droid. He then also gets in a shooting match with the rest of the stormtroopers. He shoots a stormtrooper out of the gate, and the stormtrooper comes down and pulls a Darth Maul and is cut in half by the laser field. I thought that was awesome. And once they're finally able to get through the laser gate, they're stopped by a transport full of stormtroopers. We think it's the end for Leia and Obi-Wan. We think they're caught, but then suddenly an Imperial officer shoots everybody, and we find out this Imperial officer is a part of the Resistance, and she's there to help them in the Underground Railroad that is there to help the Jedis, called the Path.
I was going to mention real quick, because I'm pretty sure we see this moments, offhandedly mentioned, but apparently Obi-Wan has a brother, which, they just kind of slip in there as we're kind of, going through these events. So I'm sure like in the next at least few years, we're going to see something about that pop up. I don't know if that's a season 2. I don't know if it's a whole other show, but it is interesting that they introduced that concept that, because I never really thought about Obi-Wan having a brother before, or if him remembering anything from, I don't know, being torn from his parents' arms to become a Padawan. I thought that was really interesting little aspect that happens in the sequence of events. One other aspect I really liked about this is that we really get to see the workaday stormtroopers. Like, hey, we're kind of reminded they're regular people, really they're regular soldiers underneath all of those helmets. So they're just like, hey, we got a job to do. This is our route, what have you. So I kind of enjoyed that different perspective, on these soldiers, working in the Empire.
Yeah, and I do enjoy and they do it throughout this episode, kind of the tease of like Obi-Wan. You think he's about to turn into the Obi-Wan we remember, and he kind of holds back. We see him kind of holding back, and I do like the journey of maybe seeing Obi-Wan as someone who doesn't have the confidence he used to have, and
and we clearly see this here in this fight scene where he's not confident with his lightsaber yet. He's using a blaster, and actually it's quite good with the blaster. But then we get into an aspect of the Star Wars universe that we haven't gotten into before. I mean, we briefly got introduced to the path through Haja on Dayu, and about this underground railroad that has been helping the Jedi stay hidden, stay safe, and have safe passage through the galaxy. And here we finally get into seeing really the behind the scenes here. We also have, as we're getting into the next part, they are in hiding in the town. It's getting later in the evening. They're hiding in this Imperial officer's quarters, in a back room, as they await what's going to happen next, as they await to get transport to their next link in the chain on the path. And what's awesome about this is there is a lot of real deep cuts in the background on the walls. We have names of other Jedi that have been there, and if you understand the language that's written on there, there's a lot of real deep cuts that are there. I won't go into it because we could get real deep, but there's some really cool Easter eggs that could potentially come up in future episodes, and as we go into future seasons, seeing who is alive. There's a couple Jedi that are still alive that we've seen from the Clone Wars that may make an appearance here, but it's just really interesting just to see, again, just the deep world building that has been happening, that we are able to actually explore in these series like The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, as we go forward into the other ones that are coming, Ahsoka, and all those coming, Book of Boba Fett, all those coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that underground railroad type thing they introduced in this episode, and I also enjoyed seeing Tala's character pop up in the sequence. I think she's Game of Thrones, and I didn't know she's going to be in the Star Wars show, so I was really excited to see her pop up in this, and we kind of learn more about her story moving forward as well. But I just think it's really cool that she's somebody that was working for the Empire, didn't agree with what was going on, and decided to be a part of helping Force users skirt the Empire. So I think that's really kind of cool concept they were employing in this episode.
I do think it is cool to see. It seems like as we get into these series, we're seeing more parallels with the real world. These are things we've seen in history in our world, so it's kind of cool, I guess, to just get a more broad view of what we know, or we kind of have the basics of the story. We know that the Jedi were a big deal in the Republic, and by the time we get to episode 4, we just know of 2 that are around. So to see kind of the journey in between, and how it does mirror some of the stuff we've seen in our world is cool.
So I'm going to quickly go through the last part of this episode. It's a lot to cover, but I want to talk about this last chunk because there's a lot that happens here. Finally, it's become the evening, and still Obi-Wan and Leia are still waiting to be able to get a transport out of there. The Grand Inquisitors and Darth Vader finally almost catch up with them. They've come to this town and they're searching through the houses. Darth Vader can sense Obi-Wan is near. He can sense it through the Force that Obi-Wan is just around the corner. and he's trying to bring Obi-Wan out, trying to really get to Obi-Wan by torturing some of the people through the town. We see him uses his force power as he lifts up this one villager, breaks the neck of this villager's son, moves stuff away, and we see him almost kill a couple other villagers, and he drags another lady across the ground. And it's just crazy how we can see just Darth Vader's anger and also him trying to goad Obi-Wan out of hiding. But then we get into a sequence that I personally didn't really like. I think they could have used this time to really condense what actually happened, because we finally see Obi-Wan using his lightsaber, more like a flashlight than anything else, as he is running away. He splits away from Leia and Tala as they go down the tunnel to get away, and he goes and tries to get Darth Vader away from Leia. He goes around into the mining equipment in the dead of night, and finally we see Darth Vader and Obi-Wan confront each other. As much as this sequence was very cat and mouse, where Darth Vader clearly is showing off his powers to Obi-Wan and just toying with him, I think at the same time I'm like, Darth Vader, come on, actually, let's get a good fight here. Don't just toy with him. Darth Vader was just moving, just slowly, just walking slowly around this area. And I don't know about you guys, but I was a little bit disappointed by the sequence.
I think it makes sense to not have the full-on fight halfway through the season, right? It's 6 episodes. So maybe that was like a leave us wanting more type situation.
Sure left me wanting more.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. Yeah. I would have liked to see more from Obi-Wan, and maybe, we love the lightsaber fights. So I definitely can relate to that.
If the lightsabers are out, I want them being used. And this is the second time they haven't really been used.
Not as a flashlight? You don't want to see him being used as a flashlight?
What? And you do? No.
No, I don't.
No, but it does then finally end up, the sequence ends up with Darth Vader doing something absolutely diabolical, where they finally confront each other. Obi-Wan is surrounded by stormtroopers and Darth Vader, and we think that it's the end, that he's going to be either killed by Darth Vader or captured and tortured by Darth Vader. And Darth Vader just takes this oil drum and just lights the ground ablaze and just drags Obi-Wan through the fire. Very reminiscent of what happened to Anakin, where Obi-Wan just left Anakin on Mustafar burning alive. And we see here just the anger. And it's what's really interesting is the visual. We actually see the fire in Darth Vader's helmet, in his eyes, as if we're seeing Anakin's fire that's within, and the anger that Anakin has, and just getting back at Obi-Wan and dragging Obi-Wan through the fire to burn Obi-Wan in a similar way that Anakin had to be burned, and the pain that Anakin wants to give to Obi-Wan. And it's such a powerful moment.
Yeah, kind of touching on this, I definitely feel like this was like a appetizer, so to speak, for what I hope we're going to receive later with Obi-Wan and Vader. But yeah, Vader's moves look so powerful. He's using his one hand against Obi-Wan, just barely fending off with his 2 double hand lightsaber moves. And yeah, at least in my opinion, I think Vader is incredibly confident in his powers as a dark side user. I feel like this kind of like harkens back to when he was battling Luke, and he's just kind of toying with him a lot of times, because he knows he can end things whenever he wants to. And I believe, at least this is my perspective, that was what he was doing here with Obi-Wan. He absolutely feels and notices that he's a lot stronger in the Force than Obi-Wan. And so it was definitely, like you were saying, kind of a cat and mouse thing, but I was okay with it personally. And yeah, I enjoyed seeing Vader really taking his time to try and make Obi-Wan suffer, and just have a little taste of his own medicine, so to speak, here. Of course, we see later that those BAFTA tanks are awesome, heal anything every time. But that scene, where the flames are in Vader's helmet, definitely a really cool shot. And I think a good a nonverbal message, as you were kind of saying, where we're seeing Vader, remembering all of his suffering and, like I was kind of saying, inflicting a taste of that on Obi-Wan.
Yeah, this was the moment when I did realize how much pain Vader was in, especially when he threw Obi-Wan into the fire, and he's like, "This is only the beginning of the pain." And that's when I realized, I was like, "Oh, he's talking about the life you live afterwards, the after effects and the pain and all that." So I thought that was really cool. How did you guys feel? There's like the scene where it was like a first person view with Obi-Wan with the lightsaber. I feel like we haven't ever seen that in a Star Wars live action. I was like, is this interesting? But I wasn't sure how I felt about it. It felt a little weird. I don't know what you guys thought about that.
What I appreciate and also despise about the Star Wars universe is that they are constantly trying to improve and constantly trying to try things. And I think that's one of the shots where they were trying something to see if it would actually work. And I agree. I don't think it really worked. It really took me out of that scene. And I think that's part of what this scene was they were trying a lot of different things, because again, they were trying to play the cat and mouse game here between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. And it was very much a psychological type thing rather than a physical thing, and I think that was part of what they were trying to convey through that shot. But I totally agree that it did feel a little bit out of place. But again, you can't fault the Star Wars people for trying new things, and because it's brought around some amazing things out of it. I mean, if we hadn't gotten Jar Jar as a experiment, we wouldn't have gotten so many digital characters through ILM, and the amazing. I mean, the industry wouldn't be where it is without Jar Jar.
Wow, that's crazy.
So let's end this episode. I mean, to be completely honest, this was probably the weakest episode so far, in my opinion. I really liked the dynamics that they played between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, and especially seeing more into Darth Vader's mindset and psychology and psyche. But I think especially how this ended, I mean, Leia is captured by Reva, and Reva takes Leia to the Inquisitor HQ. I mean, Obi-Wan is able to escape Darth Vader because Tala shoots at the stormtroopers, and that big lovable non-talking droid comes and picks up Obi-Wan and carries him away. But that's basically the end of the episode. And I mean, it sets up some stuff as we go into episode 4. A weaker episode, in my opinion, than others, but it was setting up for what, in my opinion, is the best episode, and that is episode 4 so far. It's my favorite. I absolutely love it. So with that being said, let's just get into it. So when we get into episode 4, when we last see Obi-Wan, he was suffering injuries from his former apprentice's wrath. Leia elsewhere stood face to face with the third sister with no hope of escape. Obi-Wan needs healing and Leia needs rescuing, but time is running out, and the people on the path can't stay hidden forever. So as expected, part 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi proves to be a really intense, high-stakes mission that we were really hoping for. Leia is helpless. Obi-Wan isn't faring much better with his encounter with Darth Vader, but Leia needs him, so to her he must go. Obi-Wan flashes in and out of consciousness as he is transported to safety, but he is really traumatized by what happened as he's trapped in the bacta tank. We see the burns on his arms, very reminiscent of Anakin in his own bacta tank, as the suffering is the same psychologically and physically. So against Tala's wishes, Obi-Wan gets out of the bacta tank before his injuries have time to heal. Also, an interesting note here, a very similar bacta tank to what we see in episode 5, where it's a standing bacta tank, not a laying super fancy bacta tank like Boba Fett has in Book of Boba Fett. The pair, Tala and Obi-Wan, confront another Jedi sympathizer, a smuggler named Roken, who's played by O'Shea Jackson Jr., who reveals that his wife was a Jedi before the Inquisitors found her. He reluctantly agrees to help Tala and Obi-Wan sneak into the fortress where Leia is being held.
I think a great thing this series has been doing is, despite Obi-Wan's, misgivings and lack of confidence, you never doubt him as the hero, like, and it just goes with what they said in the first episode. The Inquisitors will say the Jedi hunt themselves because they always reveal who they are. Their compassion reveals them. And we see that with Obi-Wan. And I love that. I love just how clear it is. Like, Obi-Wan is a hero through and through. Even when it's unwise, he still jumps into action.
What I also really like too is what this series is doing a lot better than other series and movies have done is just the world building and the subtext and also other people's stories, not just the main storyline, but we see, especially in the story of Roken and his wife, and what brings him to this point of wanting to actually help them. He's fearful of helping them because he knows what has happened to his own wife, yet at the same time, he's going to help them because of the death of his wife. And so we just see a lot of the background storylines of a lot of these characters that we haven't seen before. So as we go from there, we're then introduced more into the Fortress Inquisitorius, located on the moon planet of Nur. It's much bigger than it looks from the outside. The structure extends down below the water, and the further you go down, the more sinister the situation becomes. Tala uses her Imperial security clearance to enter the fortress and open a door for Obi-Wan to enter undetected from underwater. Both stealthily make their way further into the fortress, Tala guiding Obi-Wan with access to a map and security console. I absolutely loved this sequence, especially as she goes in. She almost gets caught on the security monitor. What it actually says there is location unknown, basically. And so it's clear that she isn't supposed to be there. And so that's kind of why she gets... they didn't actually provide subtitles. And that's a really interesting thing that I've been noticing here in a lot of this series is there's a lot of writing different places in different languages that you don't get a translation. You just have to kind of infer what's happening by what reactions you're seeing from other characters. And so she almost gets caught, but she doesn't. And then also, I just love this diving sequence where we see Obi-Wan, again, the same breathing apparatus that he and Qui-Gon Jinn had. And it's also very reminiscent. It's almost a shot-for-shot remake of the video game as well. We see the character go down into the Fortress Inquisitorius on the planet Nur, diving underwater and swimming to this place to get into the Fortress Inquisitorius.
Yeah, I'm currently playing through Jedi Fallen Order, and I haven't got to that spot yet. But I was reading online that was the same, fortress as in the game, so I'm pretty excited to explore that soon, hopefully. And yeah, like you were kind of saying, it was kind of cool. There's definitely awesome things about the prequels. And I was enjoying that they were, as you kind of mentioning, they were implementing the underwater breathing device that, we harken back to the Phantom Menace with. Obi-Wan's like, hey, I still got this bad boy. Let me put this in, go underwater. And yeah, I just really enjoyed on a visual level, the base, being underwater, having those huge windows, seeing the ocean and, the creatures / fish, swimming in there.
And also, too, it just gives this really awesome, murky feeling. I mean, the natural light that comes through the windows is used in a lot of these scenes to light it. And it's just this very murky, dirty kind of feeling, real dark, that really adds to the sinister nature and feeling of the Fortress Inquisitorius. Especially the lower you get, the darker it gets.
Yeah, and I personally really enjoyed like that visual element, because I feel like in these Star Wars shows as a whole, we haven't really got something too different. I enjoyed, earlier in the season, episode 2, that whole city world, that was kind of cool to explore. But having a very different visual, I guess, elements, / area that our characters are exploring and moving through was really cool as a viewer to see in this episode.
And talk about a set that was so aided by the volume. Jeez, this was like the perfect set and location to use the volume for.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree. It was great. It was cool seeing that.
And we wouldn't have been able to get it any other way than using the volume, getting that lighting. You couldn't do that on a green screen. You can't get that diffusion and that natural reflection on people's faces and natural lighting on people's faces using anything different than the volume. And
No, it's really cool that they're building on that for sure in this show.
Meanwhile, Inquisitor Reva interrogates Leia in an attempt to learn where the leaders of the path are hiding. The princess does not yield, even after being told Kenobi is dead and there's no one left to save her. Fed up with Leia's resistance, Reva has taken to a different part of the fortress, presumably where stubborn Force-sensitive beings go to die. So I really want to touch on this scene in particular, where it's the interrogation scene of Leia. I just think this was such a powerful scene. Also, wonderful acting again by the actress playing Leia. She's amazing. I mean, she's got that spunk that Leia we see
Yes.
in the original
Yes.
episode, where Leia just is talking up to Darth Vader and just standing up for herself. And she does the same thing to Reva. This girl is unfazed. And also, we also see a little bit into the powers that Leia actually has. She's able to actually use some of the Force to push back against Reva trying to get into her mind and everything. But then also, I just wanted to talk about Leia's droid a little bit here, Lola. Lola plays a huge role in episode 2, but also this episode, and we'll see a little bit later too, that it comes to be a little bit of a switcheroo, another big twist in a season already full of twists. But Lola really tries to help out Leia here, try to get at Reva, but also just Lola's name in general too. I wanted to make a interesting find that I was able to find online. I don't know if you guys know this, but Lola is actually a literal tribute to Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher, as a little girl, had a pet bird that was named Lola. And so for this young girl character of Leia having a companion, a little flying companion that is named Lola, I think was such a beautiful tribute to Carrie Fisher.
That's really cool. And I've been, every time like they have a scene with the young Leia, I always write a note about how they did a really good job of a portrayal of a young Leia, just the sassiness in some things, and her just, when she was on the back of the truck with Obi-Wan, just kind of totally confident, just going with it. And then this one, similar to the scene with her when she's older with Vader, just holding her own. I've really enjoyed the young Leia.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm enjoying young Leia a lot, like a lot more than I thought I was going to. I know, Nick, you kind of mentioned this is one of your favorite episodes. Is that correct so far? Okay. This is my least favorite. So that just kind of shows, everyone has their own opinion, but I thought there were some elements in the writing for this episode that were kind of glaringly bad for me. And this was one of those this is one of those parts that I just had a hard time with. Reva's character, episode 3, I was enjoying her character. In this episode, I wasn't enjoying her as the bad guy so much. And it was in this interrogation sequence that enjoyed, Nick, but I was having some issues with, mainly that whole job / is an inquisitor. So she's supposed to be able to pick up on the fact that people are Force sensitive. And in this interrogation sequence, obviously Leia is Force sensitive. We've kind of got some hints even, in the past couple episodes about that, but she doesn't pick up on that. All she says is, "Oh, you're very strong," when, she's trying to extract information that Leia has or even needs. And that just kind of bothered me a little bit, to be honest with you. There might be a different perspective that I'm missing, about this, which, hey, feel free to share. But that would just kind of like bothered me a little bit. But what do you have to say about it, Nick?
You know what, Chris? I completely disagree with you. And just like you disagreed with me on episode 3 with the cat and mouse sequence, I got a completely different read on this. I think that we're finally seeing Reva again. Riva is a bad character. She is, I mean, we're not supposed to feel for her, really. I mean, we are, but I think this is where Riva's finally lost control. When we see it, especially when she finally takes Leia really to the death chamber, not the interrogation chamber, it's the death chamber that we see a little bit later. But Riva has lost it. She doesn't care whether Leia is force sensitive or not. Up to this point, Riva hasn't faced a lot of opposition except for the people that she thinks are going to be in opposition. Riva has everything calculated. She's had this plan calculated, and Leia at every turn it hasn't just been Obi-Wan that has been completely dashing Riva's plans. It's also been Leia. Riva hasn't had a lot of people stand up against her, to stand up to really get under her skin. And I think Leia here has really gotten under her skin up to a point where Riva's lost it. And so she doesn't care that Leia is force sensitive. And even if she did, she knows she's just going to kill Leia. That's all she was ever going to do to Leia. Leia was always just a prop to her to get to Obi-Wan. Even if that was her big plan, to get force sensitive people, it's not to turn the force sensitive people, it's to kill them. As we see very soon after this scene, she's taken Leia downstairs. She's gonna kill Leia and put her in one of the stasis chambers as a trophy. To me, that's what the scene was about. And I agree. I think they could have done a little bit better in the writing here. And the same with the whole season. I think the writing could have been a little bit better, but that's neither here nor there. We've got what we're getting.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, like, I appreciate, this is why I enjoy what we're doing here. You know, it's cool to, you know, talk about our feelings about the same exact, you know, scene and then be like, oh, hey, you had a completely different takeaway than me. So I appreciate that. That's cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Nick.
So Obi-Wan reaches a restricted area and discovers the bodies of force sensitives are being kept in the lower levels of the fortress like a tomb. Tala creates a distraction that removes Riva from operating the machine that Leia has been strapped to kill her, and Leia and Obi-Wan are able to escape. They're detected by a sensory droid, however, and the standoff between Riva and Tala is disrupted. Tala and Obi-Wan fight and sneak their way out of the fortress, but Riva catches up to them. All seems lost until a pair of speeders fire on the platform, freeing the trio once again. This is a very short synopsis to cover a huge thing, but I wanted to talk about this huge thing. I know we're getting down on time, but this was my favorite section of this entire show so far. Is Obi-Wan is finally getting his powers back, and he's finally using them. We finally see, as he brings out his lightsaber, he's actually fighting off the droids. He's actually using and deflecting the shots of the stormtroopers, using it like a baseball bat and batting the shots of the stormtroopers back on them. And we also then see him use the force to stop the water from coming in. And again, like I said before, it's another callback to Jedi Fallen Order game, in where there's a scene where Darth Vader is in the Fortress Inquisitorius and is holding back the water in one of these tunnels. And it's an exact callback to that scene in the video game here, where Obi-Wan has to hold the water back until they can escape. And I just thought this scene was absolutely amazing. Finally, we see his powers are back.
Yeah, that scene when he's in the room where they're keeping Leia and it's dark, so you don't see him, and then the lightsaber ignites.
Yes.
Like, that is the moment we've been waiting for like, as far as the lightsaber, you know, like you just can't help but get excited when you see it and you hear the noise and the stormtroopers realize they're in trouble.
That scene hyped me up so much.
That was it was great. But the scene where they're on the, I guess, loading dock or whatever, and the speeders pop up, I don't know if I like that, but I don't know if we want to.
I would agree. I thought it was a little bit too coincidental and a little bit too perfect.
Yeah, and even just the way they were kind of flying in, they're coming in really fast into the small little area. I'm like, and then the one hovering, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've ever seen. That doesn't mean it can't do it.
We've never seen them do that. No, you're right.
That was like, it just, to see it hovering and all the kind of stuff they were doing in there and the coincidentalness of it, that kind of took me out a little bit.
I agree. And I know, like, they preface in the beginning of this episode, like, oh, nobody would be dumb enough to go to this spot, right? This tower. But I was kind of questioning, oh, are there no weapons or guns on this tower to repel incoming ships?
Yeah.
And then when they're escaping, you know, are there no ships we can send after escaping ships, or any that are in orbit that we can send after these ships? Yeah, that was a little bit weird for me personally. Again, I think it's a little bit of a writing thing. I think they have, I can't remember who, but I believe I was reading online they have someone else coming in to kind of help with, or they did have somebody come in to kind of help write the last 2 episodes a little bit.
Thank God.
Yeah. So I'm hoping, you know, these 2 last episodes kind of pick up, because I'm like, so far, like where we're at in the series, I'm enjoying the show overall, but it is a very limited amount of time we have in this show. It's only the 6 episode thing Disney's doing for whatever reason. So I'm hoping these last 2 episodes are big payoff, you know, big payoff episodes for us as viewers, you know, who are invested obviously in the story with Obi-Wan and Leia. I don't want to be like a negative Nancy or anything either. I'm hopeful as a Star Wars fan that, you know, these last episodes are going to be hitting out of the park.
The other thing I wanted to bring up too is the tomb. I think that was such an interesting section. Also, absolutely full of little hidden Easter eggs that, again, we could spend an hour on, a whole nother hour just on these Easter eggs alone. But there's a lot of characters that we see frozen in almost like an amber-like state here. That is a very good callback to Clone Wars. There was a similar type of treatment that happened to Jedi that were taken prisoner and killed by the Empire. But I thought this was so interesting to see that there is a trophy room. Darth Vader has trophies here. The Inquisitors have trophies. They're not just disposing of the Jedi. They're literally, in every way they can, trying to rub it in the face of everyone that they can, that they have killed all these different Jedi. I mean, we not only see it here, but we also see it in the main Inquisitor's meeting room. There are lightsabers of former Jedi that they've captured and killed, just lining the wall of around their table along the edge, that are all trophies of the past Jedi that they've killed.
Yeah, love it. It's once again establishing who the bad guys are.
Yeah,
you know, it's despicable. And I think, you know, Star Wars, there's certain franchises where shades of gray are good, you know, maybe like Game of Thrones or other things like that. Star Wars, let's keep the shades of gray to a limited capacity. Let's see who the good guys are. Let's see who the bad guys are. And another reinforcement. Darth Vader, the Empire, bad guys, without a doubt.
I think it also adds to Reva's character too. Is I'm sorry, Chris. I think Reva has a much longer journey if she was to come back than we're hoping that she's going to have. I mean, she's very much a bad person and enjoys being bad and enjoys. So I'm interested to see where her journey takes. I think her journey is going to be a journey, but it's going to be a longer one than we hope for.
Yeah, and one thing that's coming to my mind while watching, I guess, these last 2 episodes, 3 and 4, is I'm really hoping, as far as the direction of the show, that we get a big showdown between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader, and that we're not going to have the big finale between Reva and Obi-Wan. That's not what I'm here for.
No,
personally.
Absolutely
that's
not.
That's my concern. That's my concern with where the show may take us.
And I'm also really curious to see where they go, especially with Darth Vader's character, being that Hayden Christensen is actually underneath the mask.
Right.
Seriously, if he's just going to be under the mask and in the back to tanks, and that's all it's going to be, like, what's the point? Like, we could just have any stunt person being Darth Vader, but having Hayden Christensen there on set, like, I hope we get a better payoff than what we've seen so far.
Yes. And, you know, as you're kind of saying, that's kind of my main concern is I want more Darth Vader Obi-Wan. And I overall am enjoying Reva's character, but it is a new character. You know, we don't have that history with Reva's character, so I'm really hoping that we get more of that Obi-Wan Darth Vader square off. That if we're gonna potentially quote break canon a little bit here, let's make it pay off. You know, for us as viewers is my hope. You know, which I'm sure they're gonna go and do that, but you know, I'm a little iffy if they are. at this point, to be honest.
So finally, they are able to escape, and Reva manages to avoid Darth Vader's wrath by promising him she's tracked the ship and hasn't lost Obi-Wan after all. Vader seems to think that Reva might be lying, but he lets her go anyway. Back on the ship, Roken learns one of their own has been shot down in the escape. Obi-Wan and Leia hold hands, breathing with relief, believing they've avoided the worst of things for good. But it turns out Reva did find a way to track Leia and Obi-Wan through Lola. The tiny droid's lights flash red. The rebels aren't safe after all. Right before we get to that end part, which was a huge twist we all didn't see coming, or maybe we did. The scene with Reva and Darth Vader, I absolutely love this because we again see Darth Vader just lose it. I mean, we see him moving faster than he ever has moved before as he just comes storming into the room and then just picks her up by the neck using the Force and raises her up. And Reva, being the wily little eel that she is able to wriggle her way out again with using a lie and using all her efforts that she can to get in his best graces. But I think it's just so, again, going back to what you're saying, seeing a lot of Anakin coming through Darth Vader rather than Darth Vader. I mean, Darth Vader is a very calculated evil villain, as we see in the original trilogy. But as we see, Anakin is absolutely not in control, and here we're seeing his anger and wrath come through as he picks her up and he's just so angry he's about to just kill her, even though she is the most devoted follower of his, even though canonically Darth Vader hates the Inquisitors.
Sure.
It's so interesting. It was one of my favorite parts of the episode.
Yes.
And
definitely.
as always, whenever Darth Vader loses it, it's just so interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it is a good reminder to us, especially, I guess I'm enjoying it as someone that wasn't huge on Reva's character, I guess, in this specific episode. It's like, okay, yeah, Darth Vader's here. He's calling shots. He's upset, because he told Reva, like, hey, you're either gonna succeed or you're gonna die, is what we kind of saw, I believe, in episode 3. So he's beginning to, hey, you failed, taking you out right now, but she had that backup, with the droid Lola, which I think, again, it is kind of cool that the camera kind of pans down to the droid and it just it's red, that just like signals to the audience, all right, it's not over yet. The one thing, again, writing wise, I wasn't huge on is we lose one of the pilots in this sequence. Everyone's all sad about it. And as an audience member, I don't care. I don't care.
We didn't have enough time for that to pay off. We didn't have any relationship with the character, and especially with this group, there wasn't enough time to build loss in us as an audience with this part. I completely agree about that.
Right. And like, as far as like Leia and Obi-Wan, I don't know, I wouldn't as their characters, I'd be like, hey, we're together again, we got out of there, but they're all mopey because one of the pilots died. And I was kind of like, okay, that's an interesting take. I see what they're trying to do, but like you said, there wasn't enough emotional connection to that character, I guess, for them and or us to be feeling that way. But I really enjoyed this last sequence overall in this episode. The whole Darth Vader and Reva sequence of events, and then it's as I was kind of mentioning, setting up, okay, what's going to happen here in episode 5 as far as what's going to happen with our characters moving forward. Is Obi-Wan going to drop Leia off and call it a day in that regard, or are we going to continue seeing Leia moving forward with Obi-Wan in the next few episodes?
And I think Lola as a character is such an interesting character because Lola, what is this, the third time she's been destroyed basically and put back together? Like, Lola is such a cute droid. I mean, we're going back to BB-8 and Grogu. I mean, Star Wars is really good at creating these characters that are these droids and little characters that are just adorable.
They know what they're doing.
But in particular, this one was a little twist that I didn't see coming. But at the same time, it's it killed me at the same time, because this is a character that I've been invested in. It has such character, Leia's best friend, that actually does genuinely do a good job at trying to help her, and failing, yet now her best friend is now going to be turned against her. So I'm interested to see where this takes them, if it's just used as a tracker or if it's actually been changed to a evil droid, a mouse droid. I really did like that little sequence where the mouse got shot and sped away, just like in episode number 4. So it was really cool to see that. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 4. There is 2 more episodes left, and I'm really looking forward to them. Yet at the same time, how are they going to end it in only 2 more episodes? There's so much that is still left to be said and left to be told. So interesting to see how they try to work that out. Wanted to, as we're wrapping up, I just want to give the time over to both of you as time to kind of give your final thoughts, reviews, what you thought about these 2 episodes, episodes 3 and 4, and what you're looking forward to with the final 2 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm really still invested in this show. And I think the last 2 episodes are really going to, at least for me personally, kind of dictate my big takeaway feeling for this series. So I'm very hopeful that we do a payoff with a lot of the story arcs that they've built up. I'm interested to see what happens with Tala, Reva, if Qui-Gon's going to actually speak to Obi-Wan, how that's going to play out. Well, also hoping to see a little bit more of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan interactions overall. And I'm really enjoying Leia. I'm interested to see, how her and Obi-Wan part ways, in this series. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm excited for the last 2 episodes to review with you, Nick, very soon.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the next 2 episodes look like. Well, like you said, there's a lot, it seems like, that we want to see between now and the next 2 episodes. They could pull Stranger Things. The episodes could be like an hour and a half long. They could be their own movies. We don't know. They don't have as many limits on streaming. So I doubt that's what happens, but maybe that is. But yeah, overall, enjoying the show, still invested. I do find myself drawing comparisons to that in Mandalorian, in that it's like this guy who's protecting a kid, essentially a child. And sometimes when I make that comparison, I think it hurts this show, because it's not, like we said, maybe the writing's not as good. Also, we know that Leia is not going to be harmed, or, she's not going to be killed. She's not going to be permanently harmed. We never saw any kind of sign of that. So that kind of takes the stakes away sometime for me in the moments when I draw those comparisons. But I think the main story is Obi-Wan, this great Jedi warrior, who was as wise as Yoda and as powerful as Samuel L. Jackson's character, Mace Windu, getting his mojo back, getting his confidence back. So I think that's the real story, and I am invested in seeing how that plays out. So I'm still on board.
Absolutely. And I'm in a very similar boat to both of you. I am totally invested in this show. I think that it is doing something that the other shows and other movies haven't done so far, in that it's doing a wonderful job of world building and tying in a lot of other stuff that has been non-canon so far and bringing it into the main canon of Star Wars, and we get to explore other places that we haven't seen before. We're actually off Tatooine, thank God. But again, I'm torn because it has a very different feeling to the other shows so far, and I think that it has done a disservice in not utilizing the master and expert that Dave Filoni is, and not utilizing the expertise that Jon Favreau has done in building the Star Wars extended universe through these shows, because it does suffer from a lack of good writing. It does suffer from some plot holes. It does suffer from storylines that don't really pay off. So I think the last 2 episodes are really going to do it for me, to see whether this fits in with my love of this universe, or if it's going to go on to the same junk pile that is episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then also the sequel series that is 7, 8, and 9. But I just love Star Wars so much, and I really do look forward to see whether episodes 5 and 6 bring this back home and really hit it out of the park, or whether it just is a show that is going to just live within the universe of Star Wars, the extended cinematic universe. But either way, I'm loving it, having a great time. I'm only saying this as a huge Star Wars fan, but also as just a fan of watching and just living in this universe. It's scratching the itch that I've wanted. And now that we're finally getting Obi-Wan having his powers back, actually utilizing the Force the way that it should be utilized, I'm really looking forward to the final showdown between, as you say, Chris, hoping it's going to be Obi-Wan and Anakin / Darth Vader. Not so much Reva, but we'll see. And we will see together. So that will about do it for this week's episode of the Cinema Club. I'm so happy that you guys are back, that we're back, and that we've gotten so much support going forward. And as always, please join, if you haven't already become a member of the Cinema Club, at our Facebook page. It's a Facebook group that you can join at facebook.com/group/the Cinema Club TCC. And as I said last time, we have switched over to a new podcast hosting site called anchor.com by Spotify. And so we are available still on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and really anywhere else you get your podcast. It isn't going to change really anything, just our main web host has changed. And we thank you so much for your support. Leave a review for us. It will really help us be seen by other people to get more people to be a part of the community. So with that, thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next one.